I stood there, arms crossed, as the auctioneer's gavel slammed down with a sharp sold. In a heartbeat, riding mowers, antique tool chests, kayaks, old wine racks, kids' bikes, and even a couple of generators were gone snatched from the HOA members who thought my ranch's storage shed was their personal dumping ground. The crowd erupted. Board members shouted into their phones. One woman collapsed to her knees, sobbing over a vintage sewing machine like it was her lost heirloom. It was pure pandemonium. And you know what I did? I turned, strolled back to my house, and left the door unlocked, practically daring them to come knocking. Let me rewind to how this showdown started. I'm Mark Hensley, a 48-year-old retired mechanical engineer and widower, living on a sprawling ranch just outside Dallas, Texas, a place my family's called home for 2 generations. I came back here after losing my wife, seeking solace in the wide-open spaces. But peace turned to war when the neighboring HOA decided my property was their free-for-all storage unit. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It's about drawing lines, demanding respect, and showing what happens when you bet against someone who's ready to fight. Which city of the United States are you watching from? Drop a comment and share with us if you have any confrontation with the HOA. We'll narrate your story on our channel. Past 4 years ago, I came back for peace, quiet, healing, but I didn't realize the real war was waiting for me right behind the white picket fences. That war had a name. Samantha Driscoll, HOA president. If you've ever seen someone wear entitlement like perfume, that's Samantha. Blonde, sharp suits, married into old money, and absolutely obsessed with community cohesion, which in her language means control her minions. The HOA board, Jeff the ex-cop with nothing to do, Marlene who gossiped more than she gardened, and Todd, a middle-aged it guy who acted like he was the mayor of the cul-de-sac. I joined the HOA reluctantly when I inherited the ranch, since technically part of my land touched the newer residential development behind me. I was forced into it. I didn't care much at first. I paid the dues, nodded at meetings, and mostly kept to myself. But all that changed when I returned from a 2-week road trip to Colorado and found my ranch storage barn full of other people's belongings. I'm talking everything from baby cribs to seasonal wreaths, paddle boards, and about 8 giant boxes labeled Becky's wedding decor. It looked like a thrift store exploded in there. I nearly broke the barn door trying to swing it open. I marched straight to Samantha's house. She greeted me with a smile so fake it could peel paint. "Oh, Mark," she said sweetly, "we assumed you wouldn't mind the storage unit facility in town. Raised their rates again, and since your barn wasn't being used, I couldn't believe it. You assumed I wouldn't mind. It's just until spring." She cooed. "Think of it as a favor to the community." "I don't remember offering one," I replied coldly. She blinked like I just spoken French. "Don't be difficult, Mark, it's for everyone's benefit." I stormed off my hands, shaking that night. I tried calling the HOA board directly. No one answered. I left voicemails, sent emails, nothing. Then came the cherry on top. 2 days later, a community storage agreement was posted in the neighborhood newsletter without my signature. Without any legal right, they were now charging residents a small monthly fee to share the barn storage space. Guess where that money was going? Yep, the HOA account. They had literally turned my private barn into a community F-funded rental unit. I was furious, but I'm not the kind of man who explodes. I'm the kind who plans. The next morning, I walked into town to see Gerald, my lawyer and lifelong friend, I showed him the newsletter, photos, and access records. He blinked hard and gave me a long, low whistle. This is the dumbest HOA move I've seen in 30 years, he muttered. You've got them, Mark. That's private property. But I want to do this clean. I said no lawsuits yet. I just want my space back. He leaned back, smiled slowly. Then here's what you do. And that's when the wheels began turning first. I changed the padlock on the barn. I didn't touch anyone's stuff yet. I just made sure no one could get in without me. I installed a motion camera on the door, and I waited. Oh, they noticed quickly. I started getting angry emails from the board. Samantha came by twice, once to lecture me and once to beg me. I told her nothing. I didn't even let her into the barn. I'm organizing it all. I lied. You'll be notified. Meanwhile, I cataloged every single item in that barn, photographed them, boxed them, tagged them, and I found a little nugget in Texas property code. If someone stores property on your land without permission for more than 30 days and you make reasonable efforts to notify them to remove it, you can declare it abandoned. So I posted public notices on the HOA bulletin board on Nextdoor, and even stapled some to a few trees. I gave them 21 days to remove all items. Nothing happened. That was all I needed, and that's when I made the next move. I called up an auctioneer. His name was Vince. Big guy, bigger personality. He helped organize community events and estate sales across the county, I told him. I had about a barn full of items that needed moving fast. When I told him the story behind it, he laughed so hard he nearly dropped his clipboard. We scheduled the auction for a Sunday afternoon. I printed flyers. I ran a local Facebook ad. I didn't mention the HOA in any of the ads. I let curiosity do the work. The day before the auction, I sent one final email to Samantha and the board. You have until 6 p.m. today to remove any personal property from my barn. After that, all contents will be assumed, abandoned, and sold. Consider this final notice. I even attached the legal clause. Guess what? No one showed up. The next day was wild cars lined the gravel driveway. Neighbors, antique dealers, bargain hunters. They all came out. Some HOA members walked in like everything was fine until they saw their beach umbrellas, their camping gear, their baby strollers being tagged for bidding. That's when it hit them, and the screaming began. And now we're back to where this chapter started. The gavel falling, the barn empty, the HOA humiliated. But here's the thing. Just when I thought they would retreat quietly, I saw Samantha on her phone, red-faced and pacing, yelling into the receiver. They can't do that. That's our property. I want the sheriff out here now. And that's when I heard the crunch of tires at the end of the driveway, blue and red lights flashing. The sheriff had arrived, and I had no idea what would happen next. The sheriff's SUV rolled up slowly, its tires crunching over the gravel like thunder in my ears. Every head turned, conversations froze. Samantha rushed toward it like it was a lifeboat, and she'd been stranded in the middle of the ocean. Officer, officer, over here, she shrieked, waving her manicured hand like she was hailing a cab in New York. I stood at the barn doors, arms folded, heart steady, not because I wasn't nervous, but because I knew I was right, and more importantly, I had receipts. The sheriff stepped out, a tall, sunburnt man with a thick mustache and tired eyes. His name tag read Sheriff Dalton. I'd seen him before at the feed store, polite, quiet. He tipped his hat to the crowd before turning to Samantha. Ma'am, calm down. What's going on, Samantha? launched into a wild-tale criminal trespassing property theft. Emotional distress, she even claimed I had kidnapped a woman's belongings. Sheriff Dalton held up a hand. Slowed down. Who owns the property? She gestured dramatically to the barn, he says. He does, but I stepped forward and handed him a folder. Inside were the land title, the original property lines, the recorded security, footage of people unloading their stuff into my barn, copies of the notices I posted, and even printed times from the HOA's own newsletter proving they were collecting storage fees. Dalton flipped through it silently for a full 2 minutes. Then he looked up at Samantha and said words I will never forget. Well, it's pretty clear. This isn't your property, and unless you have a court order, there's not much I can do, looks like. Mr. Hensley followed proper procedure. Her jaw dropped. But you don't understand. He sold our things. He nodded. Looks like they were declared abandoned. Texas laws on his side. Samantha spun on her heels and pointed a finger at me. This isn't over. I will sue you. Get in line, I muttered, watching her storm off like the world had betrayed her. The sheriff turned to me. You want me to stick around till the auction wraps? I smiled. No need. Everything's under control. He tipped his hat again. Well, call us if anything gets out of hand. With that he drove off, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a very red-faced HOA board. But the fallout had only just begun. The auction wrapped up around 6 miles per hour. I made just under $4. 300 after Vince's cut. Not bad for a bunch of items that weren't mine 2 weeks ago, but more than the money. I had made a point still. I knew the HOA wouldn't let this go. I expected angry letters, maybe a complaint to the city. What I didn't expect was what happened the next morning. A notice was duct-taped to my mailbox. Emergency HOA meeting, all members required to attend. I took the paper off, read it again, and laughed out loud. They were scrambling, trying to save face. I had no intention of going, but something in my gut told me I should. That evening, I parked my truck just outside the community center. It was packed. Word had spread fast. Some folks looked at me with admiration. Others looked at me like I'd burned their grandmas. Rocking chair Samantha was already seated at the front table with the other board members, looking rattled but trying to keep her posture straight. When the meeting began, she cleared her throat and spoke into the mic. We are gathered here to discuss. That she paused, her eyes darting toward me. Unauthorized liquidation of community property by one of our members. Gasps filled the room. That barn was never officially designated as community property, I said, loud enough for the room to hear. She ignored me. We believe a terrible misunderstanding has occurred, and while we understand frustrations, we must ensure that property rights and community trust are upheld. I raised my hand. A man named Gregory, someone I barely knew, who lived 3 blocks over, stood up instead. With all due respect, you all overstepped. He posted legal notices. You ignored them. Murmurs of agreement filled the room. Then Angela, a mom of 3 who'd stored her kids' old toys in the barn, spoke up. He could have warned us more nicely, but still, I get it. It was his property. Another guy chimed in. I didn't even know we were being charged to store things there. Where did that money go now? It was Samantha's turn to squirm. She shifted in her chair, fiddling with a pen. I watched her carefully. Her tone changed. Well, the fees were minimal, just a few dollars for maintenance, and they were used for the community garden and administrative costs. Which garden? Someone barked from the back. That patch of dirt behind lot 19. The room cracked with awkward laughter. I leaned forward. I'd like to make a motion, Samantha sighed, clearly trying to keep control. Go ahead. I move that the HOA board be audited by an independent third party, and that all spending for the last year be disclosed to the community. The room fell silent. Then Gregory stood again. I seconded that motion. One by one, people raised their hands. Marlene and Todd looked like they'd swallowed bees. Samantha's face turned a shade of maroon that probably hadn't been discovered by science yet, and just when I thought things couldn't escalate further, Samantha slammed her hand on the table. You people are ungrateful. I've spent years holding this neighborhood together. A hush, then a slow clap started from the back of the room. Someone near the door muttered, "We didn't ask you to be Queen Samantha." That's when she stood up, grabbed her folder, and stormed out. Todd and Marlene trailed awkwardly behind. The meeting fizzled out after that, but the chaos didn't. 2 days later, I received a letter, not from the HOA, but from a lawyer. You are hereby being sued for damages in the amount of $29,400 for the loss of community-owned property. I read the letter twice, then I picked up my phone, called Gerald, and read it to him. Word for word, he didn't even pause before replying, "Well, Mark, it's time we go on the offensive." And just like that, I realized this war was only getting started. I stared at the lawsuit papers on my kitchen table, a hot mug of black coffee trembling slightly in my hand. Gerald had told me it might happen, but still seeing it there in black and white with all those big threatening legal words made it real. 29th out of $400. That was the estimated value the HOA claimed I'd stolen when I held the auction, except none of it had been mine to begin with, and that was the whole point. They had used my barn, my land, without permission, then blamed me when I did something about it. It was like someone broke into your garage, left all their junk, and then got mad when you sold it at a yard sale. I called Gerald. He answered on the second ring. Let me guess, they sued. Bingo, he sighed. Don't worry, I'll file a countersuit first thing in the morning. Will demand compensation for unauthorized use of your land, back rent for storage, emotional distress, and property cleanup. Think we'll win. I know we'll win, but that's not the point, Mark. They're trying to exhaust you, bleed you dry with paperwork. This isn't about the money, it's about power. I swallowed hard. He was right. This was Samantha. This was personal. The next day, I went down to the courthouse with Gerald. We filed our response, then drove over to get some tacos from a food truck on Main Street, like it was just any other Tuesday, except it wasn't, because by the time I got home, my life was already buzzing with gossip. My neighbor, Linda, knocked on my door that evening. Early 60s, used to be a school teacher. Always wore oversized sunglasses, even indoors. She had a pie in her hand and a burning question on her lips. I heard, "Samantha's trying to sue you." Blind Eye smirked. "That's the rumor. You going to take that lying down?" "Nope." She handed me the pie. "Good. You know you're not the only one." She steamrolled. My eyebrows lifted. "Go on." She stepped inside and sat at my kitchen table. Last summer, she had a contractor tear up my front walkway because it didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. I was on vacation, came home to a pile of bricks and a $1,200 invoice. That's criminal. She is criminal, just wears lip gloss over it. That night, I got on my laptop. If this was going to be a war, I needed allies. I started compiling complaints, reports, and testimonies from other neighbors. I even created a simple Google form for people to anonymously report abuse of power by the HOA. By the weekend, I had 15 submissions, 15 stories, all eerily similar: unauthorized fines, harassment over lawn decor, threats of foreclosure over unpaid fees that were never billed. Some neighbors had paid just to get her off their backs. It wasn't just me she was targeting, it was everyone. Meanwhile, the HOA continued, pretending like nothing had happened. They sent out the usual cheerful newsletter that week: movie night at the park and spring fling coming soon. But buried inside in tiny print was a short announcement: we are currently handling a civil matter related to the misuse of private facilities. The board assures the community that legal steps are being taken to protect HOA rights. Protect HOA rights from me. That was the moment I knew I had to strike harder. I called up local Channel 7 News. I knew the anchor, Dana Watkins, from high school. We weren't close, but we'd crossed paths at enough reunions. She remembered me, and when I told her what was happening, she was all in. We met the next morning at my ranch. She brought a cameraman. I walked them through everything: how they used my barn without permission, collected money, ignored warnings, and sued me when I finally took action. She was stunned. That night, the piece aired during the 6 p.m. news. It was titled HOA, or Hostile Local Man Fights Back After Community Storage Scandal. It spread like wildfire. My phone blew up with texts. Strangers were emailing support. Even my old engineering supervisor in Houston saw it and called just to say, hell yeah. The next HOA board meeting was standing room only. Samantha didn't show up. Todd and Arlene looked like deer in headlights. People were yelling, demanding answers. Linda stood up and read aloud her story. Then Gregory, then Angela. It was like a town uprising. I didn't even have to speak. The vote was called to temporarily suspend the entire board pending investigation. It passed unanimously, but just as the room erupted into cheers, a tall man in a navy suit walked in through the back door. He didn't say a word. He just handed a letter to the temporary chairperson, nodded once, and walked out the room. Went silent again. The chair opened it, adjusted her glasses, and read aloud, effective immediately: a temporary injunction has been filed by Samantha Driscoll to halt all HOA voting actions and board removals until the civil case is resolved in court. Signed by Judge Harrow, 68th District Court. The cheers stopped. The energy died. The fight had just escalated, and I knew right then we were going to war in court. But what none of us knew yet was that Samantha was hiding something big, and it was locked inside her. HOA laptop. I just had to find a way to get it. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay on my old ranch bed, the ceiling fan humming above me, going over every detail in my mind: the injunction, the lawsuit, the board suspension being frozen. It all stank. Samantha wasn't just playing dirty, she was playing protected. But that line in the judge's injunction kept bugging me: until the civil case is resolved. Why was a district judge fast-tracking an injunction over what was basically a neighborly feud? Why was Samantha panicking this hard? She was smugged, sure, but something about her desperation felt deeper. That's when my phone buzzed at 2:37 a.m. It was a text from Linda. You awake, I think. I found something. I sat up immediately. Come over. 15 minutes later. Linda was sitting at my kitchen table, again, this time without a pie, but with a USB drive. She slid it across the table. I borrowed Marlene's laptop. She left it at my place last week during wine night, said she had to run home, and never came back for it. I stared at the little gray stick like it was a loaded gun. You're saying this has board emails, meeting minutes, expense records, all? The HOA files Marlene had on that laptop. I copied everything. I plugged it into my laptop and clicked open the folder labeled HOA Admin 2024. That's when the truth started unfolding over the next hour. Linda and I read through hundreds of emails and spreadsheets. At first, it was petty stuff. Complaints about lawn flamingos who parked too close to whose driveway, but then around January of this year, the emails change. There were messages between Samantha and a contractor named Briggs Property Solutions talking about expansion permits, language like clearance, before residence notice and unified community usage. Approval was used vaguely. What is this? I asked. Linda shook her head. Keep reading. The next folder was marked Land Usage Plan Phase 2, and there it was, maps, blueprints. They had been planning to annex part of my ranch into a larger, HOA-owned recreational zone, without telling me, without city approval yet, but they were collecting storage rent to build the fund for it. My barn was just the start. I leaned back in my chair, my chest tight. They were banking on me not fighting back. I whispered, and when you did, she hit the panic button, Linda said, her voice low. Then I opened a spreadsheet that made my jaw drop, a list of storage rental contributors, every HOA member who had paid fees for barn access, except the math didn't add up. Out of 38 names, only 14 matched the payment logs. The rest, nothing but the HOA ledger showed money was received. I scrolled further. A column read, Reserve Transfer, Admin Discretion. She'd been pocketing the difference. All those administrative fees. Samantha was laundering HOA funds through fake contributors. She was stealing from everyone. I closed the laptop slowly. This wasn't about lawn chairs or clutter anymore. This was about fraud. The next day, I went straight to Bougel. With everything, his eyes lit up like he'd just been handed a golden ticket. This is huge. Forget small claims. We take this to the district attorney's office. This is felony-level embezzlement. But won't she just deny it? Say it's fake? He grinned. We'll subpoena the real laptop. Let the digital forensics speak. I was nervous, but excited for the first time. We were ahead by Friday. Gerald had submitted a formal request to the court, including screenshots, payment discrepancies, and the digital trail. Then he filed for a criminal investigation request with the DA's office that same day. Channel 7 ran a follow-up story. HOA president accused of financial misconduct. Residents demand answers. Samantha didn't appear in public again that weekend. By Sunday, her house was quiet, curtains drawn, cars gone. But Monday morning, I got a call that changed everything. It was Angela, the mom who'd supported me early on. Mark, Samantha's gone. I sat up. What do you mean, gone? She moved out, packed up a moving van last night around 2 a.m. Someone saw her getting in with suitcases. Now the house is empty. My mind spun. She ran before the investigation even got legs. I called Gerald. He picked up on the first ring I heard. Don't worry, it actually strengthens our case if she disappears. During an active civil dispute, the court can rule in our favor by default. But where would she go? I don't know. But someone like her doesn't just disappear. She's hiding something else. Then came the knock at my door. It was Sheriff Dalton. He looked grim. Mind if I come in? I nodded and led him to the kitchen. We got a tip from someone in the HOA. He began, said Samantha's been hiding HOA money in a separate account, personal offshore account. Cayman Islands. I blinked. That's a federal crime. isn't it? Yeah, he said, sitting down, which is why the feds are now involved. Then he looked me in the eye. You need to be careful. Someone tipped her off. She didn't just run. She knew what was coming. I leaned forward. Sheriff, you think someone on the board helped her? I know someone did, and we intend to find out who. That night I barely slept. The lawsuit against me still active, the board still technically frozen thanks to that injunction, and Samantha gone. But the worst part, the very next day, someone broke into my barn. They didn't steal anything. There was nothing left to steal, but they left a message on the wall, spray painted in big, dripping red letters. You think you won, you didn't, and I realized the real fight was just beginning. The words on my barn wall haunted me. You think you won, you didn't, spray painted in thick red letters across the wooden planks. Like blood on a battlefield, I stood frozen for a minute, letting the morning wind whip through my shirt. Then I slowly stepped inside. Nothing else had been touched. No windows broken, no footprints that I could see on the dusty floor. Just those 6 words burned into my brain. Someone wanted me. Rattled. It worked for about 10 seconds. Then the fire lit inside me all over again. I called the sheriff. Dalton came within the hour this time, with a crime scene tech and a camera. He looked tired, like this whole HOA mess was spreading wider than anyone wanted. Same red paint was used on a mailbox vandalism case last month, he muttered as he took pictures. We didn't catch the guy then, but this might finally tie things together. I nodded. You think it's one of the board members? He didn't answer, but the look on his face said everything. Before he left, he warned me, be alert. Mark, whoever's behind this, they're not just angry, they're desperate. By evening, I had 2 new locks on the barn and a motion-activated floodlight installed above the door. I also set up a second camera, hidden this time. But what happened next wasn't physical, it was digital. That night, I logged into my email and saw over 70 new messages, all from different residents, each one with some variation of the same message. Mark, I checked my dues history, and I think I've been overcharged. Samantha, find me. $200 last year for Grassel, but I was never even notified. Can we sue the HOA? Turns out the news stories had sparked something. People who had been too afraid to speak were finally stepping forward. It wasn't just a few mistakes, it was a pattern. A woman named Carla, who had lived in the neighborhood for 9 years, told me her home had almost been foreclosed over a clerical error. The HOA billed her for late payments she'd never received, added compounding fines, and then posted a lien on her home. Another guy, Ben, had paid $300 to repaint his mailbox 3 times in 1 year because the blue wasn't the approved shade. Every story was the same: abuse of power, no transparency, and fear of retaliation. I shared everything with Gerald. By the end of the week, he had enough to expand our countersuit into a class action lawsuit. Over 25 residents signed on within 2 days. We called it the People vs. Fairstone HOA. The lawsuit alleged unauthorized use of private property, fraudulent accounting and financial embezzlement, improper fines and liens without due process, harassment and intimidation of residents, and willful neglect of conflict of interest. Reporting by the board, but something still didn't sit right with me. Samantha was gone, yet someone had vandalized my barn after she left, meaning someone was still working for her, or worse, covering for her. I decided to pay a little visit to Todd, the board's it guy. He was the quietest one on the board, always typing on a laptop at meetings, but never saying much. Lived in a condo near the golf course, rarely interacted with neighbors outside official HOA business. I showed up unannounced. He answered the door in socks and a wrinkled polo shirt, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Mark. He blinked. What's going on? I'm giving you a chance, I said flatly, to come clean before this gets worse. What are you talking about, Samantha? The fake storage contributors, the missing funds, the red paint on my barn. I'm not here to accuse, I'm here to warn you, because when the feds start looking into that laptop, you don't want your name anywhere near the wire fraud. He hesitated, then shut the door halfway and glanced over his shoulder, then opened it again wider this time. Come in. His apartment was messy, boxes of old tech parts everywhere, takeout containers stacked near the sink. He pulled out a chair from me and sat down across the table. I didn't know what she was doing at first, he said quietly. She told me we were streamlining payments. I built the form, linked it to the HOA account. Then she gave me a second login, said it was for her eyes only, but you accessed it. He nodded once. After you sold the stuff in the barn, she freaked out, called me 3 times that night, told me I better not slip. I got scared, so I looked. There was a second ledger, a real one. I leaned in. How much? Almost $89,000 transferred in chunks to an account labeled S. Wells Holdings. It's a dummy company, Cayman Islands. Routing that lined up with what the sheriff had said. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. She threatened my job. My house said she had legal ties that would ruin me, said no one would believe me if it came from a tech nerd. I stood up. It's not too late to come clean, Todd. If you help the investigation, you might walk away clean. He nodded slowly. I'll write a statement, and I'll give your lawyer everything. That was the first crack in the dam. 3 days later, Marlene also stepped forward. Turns out she had recorded a phone call with Samantha a month before the auction, where Samantha admitted to collecting cash payments and not reporting them. Marlene hadn't spoken earlier because she was scared of being tied to the fraud, but now that the investigation was out in the open, she wanted to clear her name. Gerald compiled the recordings, the digital ledgers, the class action statements, and Todd's full written confession into one airtight legal document. We submitted it to the district attorney and attached it to our civil countersuit. Then on a rainy Thursday morning, I got a call that felt like the clouds had finally parted. Gerald's voice was calm but electric. They've issued a federal warrant for Samantha Driscoll. The Department of Justice is officially involved. I stepped outside, rain splashing onto the gravel, and just stood there for a while, soaked but smiling. Then I opened my front door and froze. On my kitchen table, where I hadn't left anything, sat a plain manila envelope. There were no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry, just a single line on the outside. You're making enemies you can't see inside. Were 3 photos, one of me from across the street, one of Linda getting into her car, and one of my barn door, taken at night. Whoever had been helping Samantha was still out there, and now they were watching. The photos chilled me more than the rain. My hands trembled as I held them, especially the one of Linda. She looked so normal, just locking her car, unaware someone had a camera on her. The grainy nighttime shot of my barn was the worst. It was taken from close range. Maybe 10 feet away. Someone had been on my property, again, watching, tracking, threatening. I shoved the envelope into a Ziploc bag, careful not to smudge any fingerprints. If there were any, then I called Gerald. He told me to take it straight to Sheriff Dalton. You're not paranoid, Mark, he said firmly. This is next-level intimidation, Samantha May. be gone, but clearly someone's still running her playbook. Linda was furious when I told her they think they can scare us. Oh, no, this isn't the 1800s. They messed with the wrong neighborhood. Grandma. She started sleeping with pepper spray under her pillow at the sheriff's office. Dalton examined the envelope like it was radioactive. We're officially categorizing this as criminal stalking. You're not alone, Mark, but you need to keep a low profile until we can pin this down. Keep a low profile. I laughed dryly. I'm on the 6 o'clock news every other week. You think low profile is still an option? He just gave me a tired look. Then watch your back. By the next weekend, the HOA building was locked up with crime scene tape across the doors. A state investigator had seized the HOA records, computer backup drives, and boxes of paper files. Marlene told me in confidence that even she hadn't seen what was in the back office files. Samantha kept that room locked, said it was for board security only. We never questioned it. Gerald had filed the motion to have the entire HOA board disbanded and placed under city management, pending resolution of the lawsuit. The judge hadn't ruled on it yet, but the tide was turning. People who'd once crossed the street to avoid me now waved when I drove by. Some even dropped off food. Neighbors I didn't even know existed brought lawn chairs to my driveway just to chat, share gossip, or quietly thank me. But I never felt at ease because the manila envelope wasn't the last warning. A week later, someone led all 4 of my horses out of their enclosure. They were found down by the creek bed at dawn, unharmed, but confused. Whoever did it had to know how to open those gates. They weren't easy to figure out. This wasn't kids playing games. This was someone trying to shake me. I installed more cameras everywhere, floodlights, a second alarm system, just for the barn and stable. But I still couldn't sleep. Then came the email. It arrived at 3:42 a.m. from a burner account. No subject, no message, body, just one attachment, a screen recording. Samantha's computer desktop. It showed her opening a folder titled Retaliation Plan Phase 3. There were subfolders: if auction happens, if Mark involves the media, if board turns on me. Each contained Word documents, screenshots, emails. One file was titled Anonymous. HOA allies do not delete. It was a list, a terrifying list of names. Board members, former contractors, a man named Kevin M., who turned out to be the private investigator. She had hired a Jews who managed a surveillance shop in Austin, even a Daryl, Linda's mailman, who had apparently reported every package Linda received for months. The email ended with a one-line message: she had eyes everywhere, be careful who you trust. I forwarded it to Gerald and Sheriff Dalton. Immediately, Dalton's response came within the hour: get out of the house now, go somewhere safe, do not be alone tonight. I packed a bag and went straight to Linda. She had already baked a lasagna. You're not sleeping in that barn house with people spying on you, she said, placing the dish in the oven. Let them come after both of us. I've got a Louisville Slugger and a taser from 2012 I've never used. I laughed, but inside I was shaken because it was all adding up. Now the mysterious lawsuit, the red paint, the photos, the horses, even the silent board members. It had all been part of Phase 3. That's when Gerald called me, his voice calm but urgent. We have a problem, Mark. The lawsuit hearing is being accelerated. New judge, someone pulled strings. We go to court in 3 days. What they want to silence this force, a ruling before the investigation is done. What happens if we lose? He paused. Then you pay $29,400 and lose all credibility. Even with the class action suit in motion, they're treating it as unrelated. I sat down hard. It's a trap, yes, but there's a way out. I glanced at Linda. She was sharpening kitchen knives while humming Eye of the Tiger. I turned back to the phone. I'm listening, Gerald. Explained that if we could prove in court that the civil lawsuit was retaliation for exposing financial crimes, we could motion for dismissal with prejudice, meaning not only would Samantha's side lose the case, they couldn't refile, but to do that, we needed someone from the list to testify, someone who was still active that night. I made the hardest phone call of the entire ordeal. I called Todd and I asked him to come forward in person to sit in front of a judge and say the words that would bury Samantha for good. He didn't respond right away, but the next morning at 9:12 a.m., I got a text. I'm in, but if I go down, you better promise me the truth comes out. I replied every last word. Court day arrived. The small courtroom was packed with reporters, residents, and curious townsfolk. The judge, a non-nonsense woman in her 60s named Judge Ellis, took the bench and called the case. Gerald stood with confidence. The opposing counsel, hired by Samantha's estate in absentia, looked smug, like he thought this would be a slam dunk. But then Todd walked in, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit, eyes dark from lack of sleep. He took the stand, and he told everything, from the dual ledgers to the dummy accounts, from the Phase 3 plan to the vandalism and harassment. He confirmed Samantha's threats, her bribes, her network of allies. He even named Kevin M., the private investigator, as the one who had tailed me and Linda. When he was done, the courtroom was silent. Even the opposing lawyer sat back, his face pale. Gerald stood and filed the motion to dismiss. The judge didn't even hesitate. Motion granted. Case dismissed with prejudice. This court finds sufficient grounds to believe the plaintiff's legal action was retaliatory and malicious in nature. I exhaled for the first time in weeks, but as I stood to leave, Gerald leaned in and whispered, "There's one more thing you need to know." I turned to him. He handed me an envelope, a letter from Samantha, postmarked from Mexico City. It read, "You thought this was about a barn mark. It was always about what's underneath it. You're standing on land that was never meant to be yours, and they're coming for it." My heart froze because I remembered something my grandfather once said when I was a teenager, that beneath the barn was an abandoned oil well, and now someone knew. I sat in my truck outside the courthouse, staring at Samantha's letter. The words echoed in my head like distant thunder. You're standing on land that was never meant to be yours, and they're coming for it. And oil. Well, I'd forgotten all about it. Buried memories of my grandfather muttering about black gold beneath the barn. I always thought it was one of his tall tales. He used to say, "One day this land will be worth more than people know, but not for the grass." And now it made sense. Everything, the HOA's obsession, Samantha's fake storage scam, the push to annex my barn and build the community zone, the way she'd panicked after the auction. They weren't trying to steal my space. They were trying to secure the land they knew, and they hadn't just wanted to use my barn. They wanted to control what was under it. That night, I returned to the ranch with Gerald and Linda by my side. We walked to the back of the barn with flashlights, scanning the old floorboards. There was one section deeper inside that looked newer, slightly different, wood slightly shinier, nails. We pried it up. Underneath was a trap door. We stared at it for a moment before Gerald knelt down, lifted it slowly, and shone his light inside a narrow staircase, wooden and old, led down into the earth. The air smelled like rust and old gasoline. We descended one by one, our footsteps creaking at the bottom. Was a small chamber, no bigger than a one-car garage, lined with metal piping and rusted valves. At the far end, a plaque on the wall read Hensley Oil Reserve Test Site Number 2, 1957. My breath caught. This was real. My grandfather hadn't lied. Gerald examined the space carefully. This why she ran. If you had found this while she was still in power, it would have opened everything up. Whoever tipped her off knew what was coming. Linda whistled. You're sitting on a fortune, Mark. You could be a millionaire. I looked around, stunned. Then I looked back up the stairs, but fortune wasn't the word. I was thinking Target was, because if Samantha had known, others did too, and they were still out there. The next few days moved like a storm. Gerald filed a property preservation order, with the state securing the rights to the underground structure. We contacted an independent geologist who confirmed that the well had been capped decades ago but still had potential reserves. News leaked quickly. Reporters swarmed the ranch, local TV, national outlets, and eventually oil survey companies started calling. Offers started coming in, some in the millions, but I wasn't ready to sell. Not yet, because something else happened that same week. Sheriff Dalton knocked on my door again. They found her, he said. My eyes narrowed. Samantha? He nodded. Mexico City. The DOJ, working with Interpol, located her at a private residence registered under a fake foundation. They arrested her on site. She's being extradited. Samantha had sold off confidential HOA data, resident information, payment histories, even personal IDs to a shadow real estate investment firm based in Nevada, and that firm had filed a claim of shared mineral rights on my land because in 1961 a document had been quietly filed naming future HOA appointed agents as co-beneficiaries to communal natural resources on surrounding lots, including mine. I felt my blood freeze. Again. Can they take it? I asked, voice low. Gerald stepped in. Not if we fight, but we need to act fast. It was a legal time bomb left behind by land developers, activated only if someone specifically tried to drill or extract resources, which meant as long as I left the oil in the ground, they had no leverage. But if I touched it even with a shovel, they could swarm in like vultures. They wanted you to find the oil, Gerald muttered darkly. Then they'd sue for it. It had been the plan all along. A baited trap, the barn, the storage scam, the lawsuits, the harassment, all to either push me out or make me dig. And now I stood at the crossroads, drill and face war with a shadow corporation, using ancient legal tricks, or leave it untouched and keep my peace. I sat on the porch that night, staring out at the ranch. Linda joined me, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. What are you going to do? She asked. I looked out across the land, my grandfather's land, the place my wife and I had dreamed of retiring, the place I'd fought for, tooth and nail. I'm going to do what they never expected, I said softly. I stood up the next morning, drafted a letter, and mailed it to Gerald, the sheriff, the local planning board, and every media outlet that had run my story. It read, I hereby declare this land a preservation zone. No drilling, no construction, no sale. I won't be bought and I won't be moved. This land is sacred to me and it will stay untouched forever. 2 days later, the HOA board was formally disbanded. Samantha's court date was set for the fall. Todd moved out of the neighborhood and started a cybersecurity business. Marlene joined a community church group. Linda started a podcast called HOA Nightmares from Petty to Filoni and me. I rebuilt the barn, I painted over the red spray paint myself, and I added a new sign on the outside carved in oak: private property. You may park your trust here. The camera light still blinks, but the war is over, and I'm still standing.